And with me right now here to discuss this is Briggs, Director of International Relations at Regavim. Good evening.
Hey.
And also Anat Director of the Development and External Relations in Peace Now. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. You know, I'm trying to understand the situation. I'm trying to understand the pressure that the EU and the international community is putting on Israel in this specific case. And, you know, I will ask you, Anat, do you think that this move will actually make Israel go back to the negotiation table when nothing made Israel go back to the negotiation table?
Look, I don't know if in the short term it's going to make Israel go to the negotiating table. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow. But I think it's an important step in order to help Israelis see really the difference between the Israel that Europe actually supports, what's legitimate in the eyes of Europe, and what's illegitimate, which is everything beyond the green line, which is the occupation and the settlements.
You know, I'm trying to understand how the Israelis in this specific time when we are experiencing a wave of terror inside Israel, how the Israelis will see it. Will the Israelis say, oh, you know what? Yes, yes, I understand your move. Yes, I understand the fact that you need to boycott Israeli products or Israeli products coming from the settlements. This is what will bring me back to the peace process or will make me get out of the settlements in the West Bank.
Well, clearly this is not, going to be a direct effect, as you just implied, but I think this is an ongoing process. And if we're looking at what happened here in the last few years, starting from the guidelines, for example, of 2012, going all the way to even FIFA actually recently, what we're seeing is a trend, is a global trend of the Western world that is not against Israel as a whole. It's against settlements and it's against the occupation. And really we're seeing, the FIFA is the greatest example because there was an attempt to kind of boycott all of Israel, which is something that I'm against personally. And eventually we saw that what it came down to was an issue with regards to those groups, those teams, who play in occupied territory. So I think, slowly and gradually, the Israeli public is starting to see the difference and starting to see what the Israeli government is trying so hard to hide from them between Israel proper and the settlements and the occupation.
So Ari, I will ask you the same question. Maybe this is the move that Israel needs to do or needs to get in order to understand that it needs to go back to the negotiation table and it needs to stop occupying the West Bank and occupying the Palestinians.
Lucy, the real issue is one of pure discrimination. And no one is going to be fooled by this move. And everyone in Israel understands this is pure discrimination, and it is Anat and Peace Now and organizations like Peace Now that are promoting this discrimination against Israel. The breaking the law,
of what?
Breaking world trade agreements, the GATT agreement from 1947, followed up by the WTO, followed up by the Israel-EU Free Trade Agreement, does not define Israel's territory. The GATT and the WTO does not decide if sovereign or non-sovereign territories are included or not. They include non-sovereign territories. It's against the law that's been set in trade agreements throughout the world, and now we have the EU using it to bludgeon Israel, and the EU would never have picked up that tool was it not for the likes of Anat pushing them to try and get another concession out of Israel and another concession out of Israel, and it's pure discrimination.
So if we're talking about, I will let you answer, but you are talking that it's against the law for the EU, the occupation of Israel and the Palestinian authorities in the Palestinian territories, it is against the law.
Again, there are World Trade Organizations where I'm sure Israel will sue the EU over this move. And they have every right to. There are enough professors of international law that have come out and said these type of moves are discriminatory. It's only against Jews. And it's only against Jews in certain areas. How could you not call this discrimination?
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, firstly, I want to respond to the issue of the trade agreements. Actually, since 2005, Israel has been signing and ratifying a trade agreement with the EU that provides tax benefits only to certain products that are coming from Israel and not from the settlement. And this started with Olmert, and even Netanyahu has been ratifying it ever since. So, I mean...
Doesn't change the World Trade Agreement.
You know, I just want to ask you, because I want to take it back to the Israeli society. And the Israeli society is experiencing maybe one of its worst times. The people are ripped apart between left, between right, between Middle Eastern Jews and Western Jews. And between the settlements and the Israel territories or Israel cities and Israel not settlement places and behind the 1967 borders. And you know, I'm trying to look at this from the perspective of the people who are living in the settlements, and I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of the people who are living in the settlers. And I'm thinking, when you are supporting this boycott, is basically taking work from them, this is actually ripping the people even more apart from each other. It's like not even giving them a chance, you know, to have something, because let's not forget, the Israeli government sent them to live there.
I'll start by saying that I wish we had that larger support, as you know, my colleague here is implying. I mean, I think, you know, the EU has its own policies. It's been acting upon these policies, and out of the EU support of the two-state solution come decisions such as this one. Now, with regards to Israeli society, we at Peace Now basically support allowing each citizen to choose whether they want to buy a product or not. You know, we have never called for boycott, and what we're saying is that it's perfectly legitimate for the labeling to happen in order for every citizen to make their own decision on whether they want or they don't want to buy a product that comes from the settlement. But you know how it looks?
It looks that if, let's say, something or a product is being made in Jerusalem, for example, and another product is being made in Beit El, this is separating the Jewish people themselves among themselves by a third part. So, like, what I'm saying is that basically the Europeans are making a rift inside the Israeli society, and this is something that, you know, why should someone tell me that a settler is better than me, or vice versa?
I mean, I wouldn't say this is accurate, because if you look at the vast majority of the settler population, they work in Israel proper. They don't even work in the settlements, and that's one of the reasons also there's no real settler economy. And that's another reason why, you know, the impact of something like this is going to be rather slim in economic terms. So, you know, vast majority of the settlers really actually work in Israel, and I don't see this as a direct attack on the settlers as people, but as, you know, maybe as the choice that the government has made.
And the Palestinians who are working in these factories?
Listen, I mean, of course, you know, I can't, you know, deny that it's going to impact those Palestinians that work in these factories.
Like what happened in SodaStream?
I think that the most important thing in this sense is to look at the larger scheme of things, because eventually what the Palestinians really need is to be able to develop their own economy, according at least to, you know, my perspective, to be able to build their own factories and work there, not to continue the occupation for many more generations.
So why Israel is not helping the Palestinians to build its own economy, so there won't be this connection, this direct connection between the Palestinians and the Israelis? And you know, some people will say that this is a little bit cynical, that the settlers are actually giving work to Palestinians and they are living on their lands.
Who would believe it, Lucy? I mean, and this is the whole idea. This is where the discrimination starts. It starts by, first of all, saying we need this policy to be put in place to punish Israel, and then the effect on the Jews is going to be
the international community is saying that these are
What about Northern Cyprus? What about Western Sahara? What about Taiwan? Taiwan as a country is not even recognized by the EU as a country, although in the European Union itself you'll find many products made in Taiwan. How is it possible that little Israel, this only state of the Jewish people, is discriminated against, but 200 other land disputes, not a word, not a label? Maybe it's because they don't have Peace Now working for them. Maybe if Peace Now went to Northern Cyprus, maybe they went to Taiwan, maybe they went to Tibet, maybe they went elsewhere, it wouldn't be little Israel being labeled and discriminated against. It would be another country.
But we are talking, but you know, if other countries are occupying, if other countries are doing what they're doing, I don't care. The fact is that I should...
You do care if Europe discriminates only against 1 out of 200. That stinks.
But we understand that this conflict is costing us our lives. This conflict is costing a lot of blood in Israel. So why to continue being there?
But
why not to try?
You're not asking Europeans to discriminate against Israel and discriminate against Jews because we're having to pay more because of a costly land dispute. That's really a roundabout logic there, Lucy. The idea of trying to get a foreign large power, a large bully, to punch Israel in the eye now, next week, last week, 2 weeks ago, so that it can teach Israel, or as Anat would like Israel to be taught, to concede and concede and concede again. How is that not discrimination? How is that logic?
Before I will let you answer, you don't think that if Israel will label these products from the settlements, it actually allows also the boycott that is coming on the academy, the boycott that is coming next time on Soda Stream, who moved its factory to the Negev and is not, its factory is not right now in the settlements.
Exactly the opposite, Lucy, actually. I think that what the EU is doing right now is preventing further deterioration into, as an example of the enhancement of the BDS movement. I think that by making this clear differentiation between Israel proper and the occupied territories, really they're making the power of those working against Israel, those anti-Israeli and even anti-Semitic powers who are working against Israel, smaller, less significant, less impactful, and to really represent proportionally their power, which is much milder than it seemed, let's say, last month.
Thank you. And unfortunately, I don't have any more time, but Ari Briggs and Anat Ben-Nun, thank you very much for being with me here in the studio. I wish people would have seen this discussion happening on this table and would have understood that it is possible to discuss and to talk this and maybe even solve it. Until tomorrow, have a great night from the Jaffa Port. Have peace.